How can a nation's mountains hold its oldest secrets, not in stone but in blood? What if the story of a people's origins wasn't written in books, but encoded in their DNA, waiting thousands of years to be read? This is the story of a living bridge to the Bronze Age, a tale of genetic survival against all odds, hidden in the isolated highlands of the Balkans. Are you ready to uncover it? In the rugged, formidable highlands of Albania, where limestone peaks claw at the sky and deep valleys cradle secrets older than memory, history is not a story found in crumbling manuscripts or the faded ink of forgotten chronicles. It is a tale told by the land itself, a narrative etched into the very bones of the people who have called these mountains home for millennia. Long before the rise and fall of empires that swept across the Balkans, Roman legions, Byzantine emperors, Ottoman sultans, the ancestors of the Albanians lived and died in these isolated realms, their lives governed by the harsh rhythms of the seasons and the unwritten laws of their clans. Their stories were not recorded on parchment, but were woven into the fabric of their being, passed down through generations not in words, but in blood. The mountains, a natural fortress, shielded them from the constant flux of the world below, preserving a unique cultural and genetic identity. Here, in the silent chambers of the earth, lay the remains of ancient peoples, their skeletons holding a silent testament to a past that defied written history. These bones were more than mere relics. They were libraries of genetic information, waiting for a time when science could unlock their secrets. For centuries, the story of Albanian origins was a tapestry of myth, linguistic theory, and fragmented historical accounts, often colored by the political narratives of more powerful neighbors. Theories abounded, linking them to the ancient Illyrians, Dacians, or Thracians, but tangible proof remained elusive, buried beneath layers of soil and the even deeper layers of subsequent history. The story of this land is one of profound continuity, a quiet defiance against the tides of change that reshaped the rest of Europe. While great migrations, such as the Slavic incursions of the early Middle Ages, fundamentally altered the demographic and linguistic landscape of the Balkans, the Albanian highlands remained a bastion of antiquity. The people who lived there were not passive observers of history. They were active participants in their own preservation, their societal structures, and fierce independence forged by the very geography that contained them. This was a history not of kings and conquests recorded by court historians, but of the quiet, unyielding persistence of a people, their genetic saga preserved in the silent, stony heart of the Balkans. The poetic whispers of the highlands spoke of a people who were not merely inhabitants of the land, but an extension of it, their genetic makeup a living map of ancient migrations, settlements, and survival. The story was there, written in the double helix, a biological scroll that chronicled thousands of years of existence, impervious to the fires that consumed libraries and the political winds that redrew maps. It was a narrative of survival against overwhelming odds, a story of a people who held on to their essence while the world around them was remade time and again. The clues were not in the grand ruins of cities, but in the humble graves of shepherds and warriors, in the subtle variations of their DNA that marked them as distinct. Modern science, with its ability to sequence ancient genomes, would eventually provide the key to this locked room of history, turning the poetic notion of blood memory into a verifiable scientific fact. The bones, long silent, were preparing to speak, and their testimony would challenge long-held assumptions, revealing a story of genetic endurance unparalleled in the region. A story written not in ink, but in the very essence of life itself, waiting for the right moment to be read. Deep in the soil of modern-day Croatia, in a region that has witnessed the ceaseless ebb and flow of peoples for thousands of years, archaeologists unearthed a burial site that held a silent witness to a distant past. Within this grave, dating back to the zenith of the Bronze Age, between approximately 1630 and 1500 BC, lay the remains of a man whose life unfolded in a world of nascent kingdoms and burgeoning trade routes across the Mediterranean and Europe. He was a contemporary of the great Mycenaean civilizations to the south, a witness to the era of legendary heroes and epic conflicts that would later be immortalized in myth. Yet, it was not the artifacts buried with him, nor the style of his interment, that would prove to be his most profound legacy. Instead, the most significant story he had to tell was locked within his very cells, a microscopic message that would traverse more than 3.5 millennia to reach the present day. Scientists, employing cutting-edge techniques in paleogenomics, carefully extracted fragments of his ancient DNA. In the meticulous process of sequencing this genetic material, they identified a specific marker on his Y chromosome, the haplogroup designated as J2B2, L283. This genetic signature, a patriarchal seal passed down from father to son through countless generations, was more than a random string of letters and numbers. It was a direct link to a specific lineage of people who populated the Balkans during the Bronze Age. The discovery was monumental, for J2B2, L283 is not merely an extinct relic of a bygone era. It is a lineage that thrives today, a living branch on the human family tree. Crucially, its highest frequency, its most concentrated presence in the modern world, is found among the Albanian people, particularly the Gag populations of the northern highlands and Kosovo. The man from the Croatian grave, separated from modern Albanians by over 100 generations, carried the same paternal marker that courses through the veins of a significant portion of their male population today. This was not a case of coincidental similarity or a distant, diluted connection. It was a direct, uninterrupted thread of ancestry, a genetic handshake across time. The discovery provided the first concrete, biological evidence for a narrative of profound continuity in the Balkans. It demonstrated that the ancestors of modern Albanians were not newcomers to the region, nor were they a people forged from the amalgamation of later arrivals. They were, in a very real sense, the direct descendants of the Bronze Age populations who inhabited these lands long before the rise of classical Greece or Rome. The Croatian man became a linchpin in the story of Albanian origins, a single data point that anchored their modern genetic profile deep in the prehistoric past. His existence and his specific genetic makeup serve as a powerful refutation of theories that posited a later arrival or a significant demographic replacement in the region. He is a testament to the resilience of his lineage, a lineage that survived the collapse of the Bronze Age, the expansion of the Roman Empire, the great migrations of the early medieval period, the centuries of Ottoman rule, and the turbulent conflicts of the modern era. His bones, resting for millennia in the Croatian soil, became a bridge connecting the deep past to the living present, proving that for some, the ancient world is not a foreign country, but the very foundation of their identity. The story hinted at by the Bronze Age man from Croatia, with his revealing J2B2, L283 marker, was not an isolated anecdote but the opening chapter of a much grander scientific saga. To move from a single point of evidence to a comprehensive historical narrative required a data set of unprecedented scale and complexity. This challenge was met by a monumental research effort that involved the analysis of over 6,000 ancient genomes sourced from across the Balkans and its surrounding regions. This vast undertaking represented a quantum leap in the field of paleogenomics, allowing scientists to reconstruct the demographic history of southeastern Europe with a level of detail previously unimaginable. By comparing the genetic makeup of individuals who lived during the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Roman period, and the medieval era with that of modern populations, researchers could trace the intricate threads of ancestry, migration, and admixture over thousands of years. The results of this massive study were nothing short of revolutionary, particularly for understanding the origins of the Albanian people. The data delivered a clear and unequivocal verdict. Modern Albanians are the direct genetic descendants of the indigenous populations of the Bronze and Iron Ages. Their collective genome is not a mosaic pieced together from recent arrivals, but rather a continuation of the genetic substrate that has characterized the region for at least 4,000 years. This finding systematically dismantled long-standing but poorly evidenced theories that had posited Albanians as the product of more recent historical phenomena. The analysis showed minimal genetic input from the waves of Slavic migrations that began in the 6th century CE and dramatically reshaped the genetic and linguistic map of the rest of the Balkans. While their neighbors show significant genetic markers associated with these northern migrations, the Albanian genome remained largely untouched, retaining its ancient, pre-Slavic Balkan profile. Similarly, the centuries of Roman and later Ottoman rule, while culturally and politically transformative, left a surprisingly shallow imprint on the core genetic makeup of the Albanian people. The study revealed that there was no large-scale demographic replacement or significant admixture from Italic or Anatolian populations. The Greco-Roman influence was primarily cultural and administrative, not biological, and the Ottoman presence, though lasting for centuries, did not lead to a fundamental genetic shift. The power of analyzing over 6,000 genomes lay in its statistical robustness. It allowed scientists to identify patterns with high confidence, distinguishing between minor gene flow and major demographic events. The conclusion was inescapable. The Albanian people represent a remarkable case of genetic continuity, a population that has persisted in its ancestral homeland while empires rose and fell around it. They are, in essence, a living relic of the ancient Balkans, their DNA serving as a biological archive of the region's deep history. This comprehensive genomic survey provided the definitive scientific validation for what linguistic and cultural evidence had long suggested: that the Albanians are an indigenous Paleo-Balkan people, their roots extending deep into the prehistoric soil of their mountainous homeland, forming an unbroken lineage from the Age of Bronze to the present day. The profound ancestral continuity revealed by large-scale genomic studies is not an abstract concept confined to scientific journals. It is a living reality, embodied in the genetic makeup of Albanian men today. The Y chromosome, passed directly from father to son with only minor mutations over time, acts as a powerful tracer of paternal lineage, a biological surname that connects contemporary individuals to their most distant ancestors. Among Albanians, several of these ancient Y-DNA markers persist at remarkably high frequencies, forming a tangible, living genetic bridge to the Bronze and Iron Age populations of the Balkans. The most prominent of these is the aforementioned J2B2, L283, the very lineage identified in the 3,600-year-old skeleton from Croatia. Today, this haplogroup is found in approximately 14 to 17% of Albanian men, a staggering figure that underscores the direct and substantial contribution of Bronze Age peoples to the modern Albanian gene pool. Its prevalence is not uniform, being particularly concentrated in the mountainous north, a region historically known for its isolation and resistance to outside influence. This geographic distribution provides a crucial clue, suggesting that these highland communities served as a primary reservoir for this ancient lineage, preserving it through millennia of historical upheaval. But J2B2, L283 is not the only pillar supporting this genetic bridge. Another significant lineage is R1b C2103, a branch of the R1b haplogroup that is strongly associated with the Yamnaya pastoralists who swept across Europe from the Pontic-Caspian steppe at the dawn of the Bronze Age. While R1b is common throughout Western Europe, the specific Z2103 subclade is more characteristic of the Eastern and Southern Balkans. Its significant presence among Albanians connects them to the pivotal demographic and cultural transformations that marked the beginning of the Bronze Age in the region, indicating that their ancestors were not just passive inhabitants but active participants in the ethnogenesis of the era. The third major lineage is EV13, a haplogroup that is arguably the most characteristic paternal marker of the Southern Balkans. Born in the Bronze Age, EV13 is found at its global peak among Albanians, particularly in Kosovo, where it can account for over 40% of male lineages. Its story is one of a localized population boom during the Bronze Age, with its descendants spreading throughout the region but always retaining their highest concentration in the Albanian-speaking lands. Together, these three haplogroups, J2B2, L283, R1b, C2103, and EV13, form the core of the Albanian paternal genetic landscape. They are not recent additions but are foundational lineages, each with a story that begins thousands of years ago. The fact that they continue to exist at such high frequencies today is a testament to the unique demographic history of the Albanian people. In many other parts of Europe, these ancient lineages were diluted or replaced by subsequent migrations. In the Albanian highlands, they were sheltered and preserved. Every man who carries one of these markers is a terminal node on a family tree that stretches back to the age of chariots and hill forts. They are not merely related to the ancient peoples of the Balkans. In a direct, unbroken paternal line, they are them. This makes the Albanian population a unique human archive, a living genetic bridge that allows scientists to walk back in time, tracing the footsteps of ancestors not through fragmented artifacts, but through the enduring code of life itself. The remarkable genetic continuity observed in the Albanian people cannot be understood without appreciating the profound and defining role of their homeland's geography. Albania is a land forged in geological drama, a country where the earth seems to be perpetually reaching for the sky. Nearly 70% of its territory is mountainous, a formidable landscape of jagged peaks, steep gorges, and remote plateaus known collectively as the Accursed Mountains and the Albanian Alps. This rugged terrain has been the single most critical factor in shaping the nation's history, culture, and most importantly, its genetic identity. For millennia, these mountains acted as a natural fortress, a bastion that was both a sanctuary and a prison, while the fertile plains and coastal routes of the Balkans serve as highways for invading armies, migrating peoples, and cultural exchange. The Albanian highlands were a world apart. The difficult topography made large-scale military conquest and settlement a perilous and often unrewarding endeavor for outside powers. Roman legions, Slavic tribes, and Ottoman armies could control the lowlands and the main arteries of communication, but the mountainous interior remained stubbornly autonomous, a patchwork of fiercely independent clans and tribes. This geographic isolation had direct and lasting demographic consequences. It created a powerful barrier to gene flow, drastically reducing the rate of admixture with foreign populations. When the Slavic migration swept through the Balkans in the 6th and 7th centuries, they largely bypassed the impenetrable highlands, settling in the more accessible river valleys and plains that surrounded them. As a result, the pre-existing Paleo-Balkan populations in the mountains were not displaced or assimilated to the same extent as their counterparts in neighboring regions. They were able to maintain their demographic integrity, preserving the genetic signatures of their Bronze and Iron Age ancestors. This isolation fostered the development of tight-knit, endogamous communities, where marriage was predominantly contracted within the clan or a small geographic area. Over generations, this practice reinforced the existing gene pool, leading to the formation of distinct genetic clusters that mirrored the geographic and tribal divisions of the highlands. The mountains, therefore, did more than just protect. They actively sculpted the genetic landscape. They created pockets of humanity where ancient lineages could survive and flourish, shielded from the homogenizing effects of the major demographic currents that reshaped the rest of the continent. The result is a genetic map that looks starkly different from that of its neighbors. While surrounding Slavic populations form a relatively contiguous genetic cluster stretching from the Adriatic to the Black Sea, Albanians stand apart as a distinct outlier, their genetic profile showing a clear and ancient divergence. Their DNA tells a story of life lived in a fortress, a narrative of resilience where the environment itself became the primary guardian of a people's heritage. The mountains ensure that the Albanian gene pool would remain a reservoir of antiquity, a deep, largely undisturbed well of genetic information from the ancient world, making the land and its people inseparable components of a single, enduring story of survival. The isolation afforded by Albania's mountainous terrain did more than simply preserve ancient lineages. It also set the stage for powerful evolutionary processes to act upon the population's gene pool in unique ways. One of the most significant of these is genetic drift, the random fluctuation of gene frequencies in a small, isolated population. In the secluded valleys of the Albanian highlands, where communities often consisted of only a few extended families, the effects of genetic drift were magnified, leading to a phenomenon known as the founder effect, or a geographic bottleneck. This occurs when a small group of individuals becomes separated from a larger population, and the gene pool of their descendants is determined entirely by the genetic makeup of that small founding group. Over time, certain genetic variants, which may have been rare in the original parent population, can become surprisingly common among the descendants, purely by chance. This process helps explain some of the unique features of the Albanian genetic landscape. A prime example is the amplification of rare subclades like the mitochondrial DNA haplogroup H12. While the broader H haplogroup is common throughout Europe, the specific H12 branch is relatively scarce. However, in certain isolated Albanian communities, it appears at a much higher frequency than in surrounding populations. This suggests that, at some point in the past, a small founding group that happened to carry the H12 marker settled in a particular valley, and through generations of relative isolation, their maternal signature became a dominant feature of the local gene pool. This process of bottlenecking and subsequent amplification of rare lineages contributes to the distinct genetic profile of the Albanian people. It is why, when their DNA is analyzed in a broader European context, they do not cluster neatly with their immediate geographic neighbors. Instead, the data reveals a fascinating pattern. Modern Albanians cluster genetically closer to ancient southern Balkan genomes from the Bronze and Iron Ages than they do to modern Slavic populations. Furthermore, their closest modern relatives are not their Slavic neighbors to the north and east, but rather the Greeks to the south. This genetic proximity to Greeks and ancient Balkan peoples underscores their shared origin from a common Paleo-Balkan ancestral population, which was later fragmented and partially assimilated by the arrival of the Slavs. The Albanians and Greeks represent two major surviving branches of this ancient genetic substrate. The process of genetic drift, driven by geographic isolation, therefore had a dual effect. On one hand, it reduced overall genetic diversity by limiting the introduction of new genes from outside. On the other hand, it increased the frequency of specific, often rare, ancestral markers, making the Albanian gene pool a concentrated repository of ancient Southern Balkan heritage. This tale of genetic drift is a powerful illustration of how the interplay between geography and population dynamics can sculpt the genetic identity of a people, creating a unique and deeply rooted signature that sets them apart from the populations that surround them, tying them inextricably to the ancient inhabitants of their land. While the Albanian genetic story is one of broad continuity from multiple ancestral lines, the history of one particular paternal marker, haplogroup EV13, stands out as a defining chapter in the nation's ethnogenesis. This lineage is arguably the most significant and characteristic genetic signature of the Albanian people, a veritable Bronze Age patriarch whose descendants have come to dominate the paternal landscape. The origins of EV13 trace back to a population expansion that occurred in the southern Balkans approximately 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, coinciding with the cultural and technological dynamism of the Bronze Age. It was not an imported lineage from a distant land, but a native Balkan development, a branch of the E1b1b haplogroup that experienced a dramatic and successful local proliferation. Today, EV13 is found at its absolute global peak among Albanians. Across Albania, it is carried by roughly 1 in 3 men, but this frequency soars even higher in Kosovo, where in some regions, it approaches nearly half of the male population. This extraordinary concentration points to the Albanian-speaking lands as the core territory of the population that first carried and spread this marker. The story of EV13 is one of a founder effect on a grand scale, where a successful lineage, perhaps belonging to a powerful tribe or a group with a demographic advantage, expanded rapidly and became a foundational element of the region's people. However, the genetic narrative of Albania is not monolithic, and the dominance of EV13 is balanced by significant regional variation, revealing a more complex internal structure. This is most evident when comparing the paternal lineages of the two main Albanian subgroups, the Gegs of the north and the Tosks of the south. While EV13 is a powerful marker in both groups, other haplogroups show a distinct geographic stratification. For instance, the haplogroup I2A, specifically the S17250 subclade, tells a different story. This lineage is associated with the pre-Bronze Age populations of Europe and is found at moderate frequencies throughout the Balkans. Among Albanians, however, it shows a clear north-south divide, being significantly more common among the southern Tosk populations than among the northern Gegs. This suggests a different demographic history for the South, perhaps indicating a greater contribution from Mesolithic or Neolithic Balkan hunter-gatherer and farmer lineages that were later assimilated. Conversely, foundational Bronze Age markers like J2B2, L283, and R1b, C2103 tend to be more concentrated in the north. This intra-regional genetic stratification paints a picture of a people forged from several distinct, albeit related, ancient sources. The Albanian nation is not a single, homogeneous block, but a tapestry woven from different threads of Paleo-Balkan ancestry. The dominance of the Bronze Age patriarch, EV13, signifies a major demographic event that profoundly shaped the entire population, while the regional variations in lineages like I2A and others speak to a more ancient and localized substructure that has persisted to this day. This complex interplay of dominant and regionally specific markers makes the Albanian gene pool a rich and layered archive, offering deep insights into the multiple ways of settlement and interaction that created the people of the Southern Balkans. The story of a people's ancestry is incomplete if told only through the male line. While the Y chromosome provides a clear and powerful narrative of paternal heritage, the mitochondrial DNA, mDNA, passed exclusively from mother to child, offers a complementary and equally crucial perspective on the maternal history of a population. An analysis of Albanian mDNA reveals a story of continuity and preservation that perfectly mirrors the evidence found in their paternal lineages, demonstrating that the deep-rooted ancestry of the Albanian people is a legacy inherited from both ancient fathers and ancient mothers. The maternal gene pool of Albanians is characterized by a clustering of specific haplogroups that are quintessentially ancient European and Near Eastern in origin. These are not the genetic signatures of recent migrations, but are lineages that have been present in the Balkans for many thousands of years, some dating back to the first farmers of the Neolithic period and even the hunter-gatherers of the Paleolithic. Among the most significant of these maternal lines are haplogroups J, W, T, K, and X. Each of these carries its own ancient story. Haplogroup J, for example, is strongly associated with the expansion of agriculture from the Near East into Europe beginning some 9,000 years ago. Its significant presence among Albanians links their maternal ancestry directly to this pivotal moment in human history, suggesting that their female ancestors were part of the Neolithic farming communities that settled in the fertile lands of the Balkans. Haplogroup K shares a similar history, while haplogroups T and W also have deep roots in the Neolithic and Bronze Age populations of Europe. The presence of haplogroup X is particularly intriguing, as it is a relatively rare lineage with a scattered distribution, found in parts of Europe, the Near East, and, curiously, among some Native American populations, pointing to a very ancient and complex dispersal history. What is most remarkable is not just the presence of these haplogroups, but their preservation in a specific combination and frequency that distinguishes Albanians from their neighbors. Just as with their paternal DNA, their maternal genetic profile shows a clear continuity with ancient Balkan populations and a divergence from the profiles of neighboring Slavic groups, which show a higher frequency of different maternal lineages, such as H1C and U4, associated with Eastern Europe. This maternal continuity is so robust that it has survived not only millennia of history in the homeland, but also centuries of separation and life in a foreign land. The Arboresh, a community of Albanians who fled to southern Italy in the 15th century to escape the Ottoman conquest, provide a compelling case study. Despite living in Italy for over 500 years and inevitably experiencing some degree of admixture with the local Italian population, the Arboresh have preserved the core components of their ancestral Albanian mDNA profile. The ancient maternal lineages of J, T, K, and others remain prominent among them, a genetic echo of the mothers who crossed the Adriatic Sea half a millennium ago. This demonstrates the profound resilience of these maternal lines, which, sheltered within a culturally cohesive and often endogamous diaspora community, have maintained a direct link to their Balkan origins. The combined evidence from both paternal and maternal DNA paints a comprehensive and consistent picture. The Albanian people are a product of deep, in situ continuity, a population whose ancestral roots, on both sides of the family tree, extend unbroken into the ancient past of the Balkan Peninsula. The story of profound isolation and ancient continuity etched into the Albanian genome is mirrored with astonishing fidelity in their most defining cultural artifact, the Albanian language. Known to its speakers as Shqip, Albanian stands as a linguistic isolate, a solitary branch on the vast Indo-European family tree. While it shares a distant, primordial kinship with languages as diverse as English, Russian, and Hindi, it belongs to no other living subgroup. It is not Germanic, Slavic, or Romance. It is simply and uniquely Albanian. This linguistic solitude is the direct result of the same historical and geographical forces that shaped the Albanian gene pool. The language is a survivor, a linguistic fossil that preserves features of the ancient Paleo-Balkan tongues that were spoken across the region before the arrival of the Romans and the Slavs. While the exact nature of its relationship to ancient languages like Illyrian, Thracian, or Dacian remains a subject of academic debate due to the scarcity of written records for those tongues, the consensus among linguists is that Albanian is their sole surviving descendant. It is the last echo of a pre-Roman, pre-Slavic Balkan world. The survival of the Albanian language is a testament to the resilience of its speakers and the sanctuary provided by their mountainous homeland. As the Roman Empire expanded, Latin became the dominant language of administration, trade, and culture throughout the Balkans, eventually evolving into the modern Romance languages, such as Romanian. In the centuries that followed the empire's decline, the massive influx of Slavic-speaking peoples extinguished most of the remaining indigenous languages, replacing them with the dialects that would become modern Serbian, Croatian, Bulgarian, and Macedonian. Yet, in the isolated highlands, Albanian persisted. It weathered the immense pressure of Latin, borrowing many words but retaining its unique grammatical structure and core vocabulary. It later resisted centuries of linguistic pressure from Greek, Turkish, and Italian, always maintaining its distinct identity. The language, like the people, was a product of the mountain fortress. The same remote valleys that prevented large-scale genetic replacement also served as linguistic sanctuaries, allowing the ancestral tongue to be passed down from generation to generation, sheltered from the homogenizing forces that prevailed in the lowlands. The Albanian language, therefore, is more than a means of communication. It is a cultural genome. Its vocabulary contains layers of history, with loanwords from Latin, Greek, Slavic, and Turkish providing a record of its long and complex interactions with neighboring cultures. However, its fundamental structure, its phonology, and its core lexicon are a direct inheritance from a much deeper past. The preservation of ancient linguistic features, such as specific consonant sounds and grammatical cases that have been lost in other Indo-European languages, makes it invaluable for historical linguists seeking to reconstruct the parent Proto-Indo-European language. In this way, the story of the Albanian language runs in perfect parallel to the story of Albanian DNA. Both are characterized by deep, indigenous roots, a long history of isolation that prevented replacement, and a remarkable degree of preservation of ancient features. The language is the cultural equivalent of the J2B2, L283, or EV13 haplogroups, a living bridge to a distant past, making the Albanian people not just a genetic archive, but a linguistic one as well. The same profound isolation that acted as a crucible for the Albanian people, forging their unique genetic and cultural identity, also created a complex legacy of biological strengths and vulnerabilities. This phenomenon is a classic example of the double-edged sword of founder effects and genetic drift in a small, stable population. On one hand, this history has endowed Albanians with a high degree of genetic polymorphism, an unusual and scientifically intriguing level of genetic diversity within their otherwise distinct and cohesive gene pool. This means that for many genes, there is a wide variety of different alleles, or variants, present in the population. This internal diversity is a sign of a population that has been stable and sedentary for a very long time, allowing rare, ancient mutations to accumulate and persist over millennia without being wiped out by demographic upheavals or large-scale replacement events. This rich polymorphism is a valuable resource for geneticists, providing a window into the deep history of European populations and offering clues about human adaptation and disease. However, this same sword has a much sharper and more dangerous edge. The very processes of isolation and endogamy that preserve this ancient diversity also led to an increased prevalence of certain recessive genetic disorders. When a small founding population is isolated, any harmful recessive mutations carried by the founders can become concentrated in the gene pool over generations. In endogamous societies, where people are more likely to marry within their own community, the chances of two individuals carrying the same recessive mutation having children together increase significantly. When this happens, their children have a 1 in 4 chance of inheriting 2 copies of the faulty gene and thus suffering from the associated genetic disease. This is the stark reality behind the pronounced founder effects seen in the Albanian population. They exhibit a higher than average incidence of specific inherited conditions, most notably cystic fibrosis and beta thalassemia. Cystic fibrosis, a severe disorder affecting the lungs and digestive system, is caused by mutations in the CFTR gene. While this disease exists across Europe, certain specific mutations are found at a much higher frequency among Albanians. Similarly, beta thalassemia, a blood disorder that impairs the body's ability to produce hemoglobin, is endemic in the Mediterranean region but shows a particularly high carrier rate in Albania. The prevalence of these conditions is not a sign of any inherent weakness, but is the direct, predictable consequence of their unique demographic history. It is a biological testament to centuries of life in small, isolated, and tight-knit communities. The genetic story of the Albanian people is therefore one of profound complexity. Their isolation was their shield, preserving their ancient heritage against the tides of history. But it also created specific vulnerabilities, a genetic burden that is the price of that preservation. This duality highlights a fundamental principle of population genetics. The forces that shape a people's identity are indifferent, creating a legacy that is simultaneously a source of unique strength and a cause of specific suffering. The genetic coherence of the Albanian people, their remarkable preservation of ancient Balkan lineages, cannot be attributed solely to the passive isolation of their mountain fortress. Geography provided the stage, but the drama of genetic continuity was directed by a powerful and intricate set of cultural forces that actively managed and maintained the population's integrity for centuries. At the heart of this cultural mechanism was the nation's deeply ingrained tribal structure, most famously embodied by the ancient code of conduct known as the canon. This system of unwritten laws, particularly the version attributed to the 15th century nobleman Leke Dukagini, governed every aspect of life in the Northern Highlands, creating a social environment that was profoundly conservative and resistant to external demographic influence. The canon was not merely a legal framework. It was a complete social constitution that prioritized the honor of the family, the clan, and the individual above all else. Its detailed articles on property, inheritance, marriage, and blood feuds, Jack Maria, had direct and profound genetic consequences. Inheritance, for example, was strictly patrilineal, meaning property and status were passed down the male line. This reinforced the importance of paternal ancestry and created a powerful incentive to maintain the purity and continuity of the family's bloodline. Marriage was not a matter of individual romance, but a strategic alliance between families, meticulously arranged to strengthen the clan. Crucially, the canon established strict rules of exogamy at the clan level. One could not marry within their own clan, but strongly favored endogamy at the tribal or regional level. This created a finely balanced system. It prevented excessive inbreeding within the immediate community while simultaneously discouraging marriage with outsiders, be they from a different region, a different faith, or a different ethnicity. This social code effectively drew a genetic border around the community that was as formidable as any mountain range. The infamous institution of the blood feud, while socially destructive, also had a powerful genetic effect. By tying honor and retribution directly to kinship, it reinforced clan identity in the most visceral way imaginable. A feud was not between two individuals, but between two families or clans, a conflict that could span generations. This constant state of potential conflict with other lineages solidified internal bonds and made interclan trust, let alone intermarriage, a rare and calculated risk. This entire social edifice, which held sway for at least 500 years, transformed the Albanian highlands from a mere geographic sanctuary into a meticulously managed human archive. The people were not simply a living museum, a passive collection of relics preserved by chance and circumstance. They were a living archive, a population whose genetic and cultural heritage was actively curated, protected, and transmitted according to a strict set of internal rules. The distinction is critical. A museum displays what has been left behind, while an archive intentionally preserves information for the future. The Geg tribes of the north, guided by the canon, and the more socially stratified Tosk communities of the south, with their own distinct traditions, both participated in this process of cultural and genetic preservation. Their social structures acted as a powerful evolutionary force, selecting for continuity and filtering out external genetic input. This is why the ancient Y-DNA and mDNA lineages remained at such high frequencies. The cultural software running on the hardware of the mountains ensured their preservation. The canon's legacy is therefore written not only in the history books, but in the very DNA of the people who lived by its code. a testament to the power of culture to shape the biological destiny of a nation. The story of the Albanian people, as told by their genes, language, and culture, represents a profound departure from the dominant narrative of European history. So much of the continent's story is one of flux, of great migrations, of empires rising and assimilating, of peoples blending in a vast and dynamic melting pot. It is a history of replacement and amalgamation, where ancient identities were often overwritten by new arrivals. The Albanians, however, embody a different paradigm, one of extraordinary persistence, a story of a people etched into the landscape and into time itself. Their survival is not the result of a single factor, but of a powerful and self-reinforcing triad of forces working in concert for millennia. First, the rugged, unforgiving geography provided the initial isolation, a natural fortress that buffered the ancestral Paleo-Balkan population from the full force of the demographic waves, Roman, Slavic, Ottoman, that washed over and redefined their neighbors. Second, within this geographic sanctuary, the ancient Paleo-Balkan language, the sole survivor of its linguistic family, was able to endure. This unique tongue became the primary vessel of a distinct identity, a cultural marker that clearly delineated who was part of the community and who was not. Third, this shared identity, rooted in a common land and a common language, was codified and enforced by a powerful set of social structures, most notably the tribal systems and the unwritten laws of the canon. This cultural framework actively managed the population's gene pool, promoting endogamy and creating a formidable barrier to admixture. This was not a linear chain of cause and effect, but a continuous feedback loop. The mountains protected the language defined the people, and the people created a culture that enforced the genetic isolation the mountains had first offered. This intricate interplay of land, language, and law is what makes the Albanian population a true living genetic archive. An archive is more than just a collection of old items. It is a structured repository of information that can be read to understand the past. The Albanian genome is precisely that, a biological text of unparalleled clarity and depth. Within their DNA, scientists can read the history of the Bronze Age Balkans, trace the footsteps of the first Neolithic farmers, and reconstruct the genetic landscape of southeastern Europe before the great migrations of the Iron Age and the early medieval period. The high frequency of ancient haplogroups like EV13, J2B2, L283, and R1b, C2103 are like well-preserved chapters in this genetic book, offering insights that have been obscured or erased in more admixed populations. They are a reference point, a baseline against which the history of other European peoples can be measured and understood. To be a living archive is to carry the past not as a burden or a memory, but as an integral part of one's present reality. It means that the biological and cultural distance between a modern Albanian and their Bronze Age ancestor is remarkably short. This continuity provides an invaluable window for science, but it also speaks to a unique form of human experience, one defined by a profound and unbroken connection to a specific place and a deep history. In an increasingly globalized world where identities are often fluid and roots are shallow, the Albanians stand as a testament to the enduring power of heritage, a people whose identity was not forged in the crucible of empires, but quietly and stubbornly preserved in the heart of their mountain fortress, etched indelibly into the fabric of time. This narrative reveals how geography and culture preserved an ancient people's DNA in the Albanian highlands. Their story is a unique testament to genetic continuity from the Bronze Age to today. What did you find most interesting, and how could the story be improved? Your feedback is greatly appreciated.